Fiends are usually thought of as terrifying beasts or mischievous tricksters, always ready to torment the innocent regardless of the form they take, and many Yu-Gi-Oh players have used Fiends to torment their opponents. Unfortunately, these Fiends will only really be tormenting you. These Fiends are all such awful cards that they'll never be able to do anything worthwhile in the average duel. And today, we're going to be going over exactly why these supposed terrors of the night are horrible instead of horrifying. And starting off at number 10, we have Grave Protector. This is a level 4 Dark Fiend with 0 attack and 2000 defense. It is the effect where any monsters destroyed by battle is shuffled into the deck instead. There are a few issues with this card, but a big problem for it is the anti-synergy between its effect and its stat line. Grave Protector is a pseudo-dimensional fissure on a monster, so like with most Floodgate effects, you would want it to be active for as long as possible. So you would obviously want your Grave Protector to be face up on the field. However, this card is really bad at actually being face up on the field because it literally has 0 attack. Your opponent can just walk over it by battle with basically any monster in the game. You could use a card like Moon and Mirror Shield to protect it from battle, but at that point, you should just be playing Dimensional Fissure instead. So you want Protector in defense position, but in order to do that, you have to set it instead of summoning it, which will put it face down. So its Floodgate effect won't be active. It's very difficult to get a Grave Protector on your field in face-up defense position without using a means of special summoning it, at which point you could just special summon a much stronger monster instead. It does at least have a nice defense stat, but if you want a card that can just be set, defense, and protect your life total, you have much better options even back in Goat or Edison format for that. Now, as bad as this card is, it does at least have some theoretical applications. This effect does interfere with cards like Sangan and Mystic Tomato that are popular in Goat format, which this card is legal in. You can set the card and be pretty sure that your opponent won't be able to beat it over in battle thanks to its high defense stat. However, you also have access to cards like Dark Ruler Hades in the format, which negate the effects of monsters it battles and destroys by battle, including flip effect monsters. It is a tribute monster, but considering it at least has a reasonable attack stat and no restrictions, it's still overall a much stronger card than the Protector. Not to mention that Protector still has the issue where its effect is very unlikely to be live when you want it to be. However, it does have a use case where it isn't completely terrible, but rather merely outclassed, which means that it's slightly better than the other cards on this list. And at number 9, we have Skull Knight number 2. This is a level 3 Dark Fiend with 1000 attack and 1200 defense. It is the effect where if it's tributed to tribute summon a monster, you can special summon another Skull Knight number 2 from your deck. Similar to the last spot on this list, Skull Knight has a pretty bad stat line, having very easily overcome attack and defense. Also, like the last spot, it requires staying on the field to do absolutely anything, which makes Skull Knight a very weak card. We're only really considering this card in formats like Goat because it's obviously way too weak for modern Yu-Gi-Oh! And was around early on in the game. In order for Skull Knight to work, you would have to play it and then use a trap card of some kind to keep it alive for a turn. Then you would have to have a tribute monster in hand to actually pair it with. Then you would also need something to actually use a second Skull Knight for, as otherwise it's just an extra 1000 attack on board. If you're trying to consistently tribute summon, there are far better ways to accomplish this. Simply playing the trap cards you use to protect Skull Knight in combination with high-statted monsters is going to work better at facilitating tribute summons. If you really want a card to help in this area while getting extra value, the recruiters are going to be a lot more consistent. These monsters all allow you to summon a monster of their attribute from the deck with 1500 or less attack and attack position. These cards are great at letting you not only facilitate tribute summons, but also find a variety of useful monsters in older formats. And you'd be much better off playing a Mystic Tomato than a Skull Knight in just about every situation. Skull Knight is very much a win more card. It's only good when you're already doing something that means you're getting pretty far ahead of your opponent. And all it does in that scenario is allow you to get even further ahead. It doesn't even protect the monster you tribute summon, so you don't walk into a trap card. Not only that, but it's not even good at being a win more card. The card fails on basically every account. So it's no wonder it basically never saw any real play. And at number 8, we have Doom Donuts. This is a level 1 Dark Fiend flip monster with 0 attack and defense. Its flip effect simply destroys all monsters with 0 original attack or defense. This is a very unique effect that unfortunately doesn't really have much of a home. This card was released in Galactic Overlord during the Xyz era, so flip monsters were a bit outdated at this point, though not totally unplayable like they are today. If this had a strong enough effect, players may have still considered it. Unfortunately, destroying only monsters with 0 attack just isn't enough. There are a good number of monsters as effects. Many zombies have 0 defense, and monsters with question mark attack or defense are considered to have the original value of 0 on the field, so this can also destroy cards like Grandmaju de Aiza. This does mean the card can answer a few important cards. However, answering only specific cards on a flip effect is just way too slow. Remember, in the very first set of the game, we got Maneater Bug, and we'd gotten better versions of this effect over time. Cards like 4-starred Ladybug of Doom had their moment in the sun as well, and that card was able to take down entire boards sometimes, as level 4 monsters were very common. Doom Donuts was more conditional than both of these cards and released far later, and realistically, it doesn't have much of an upside to compensate. It has awful stats, a bad effect, and absolutely nothing else to make it stand out. Of course, this card was mostly made just because it's funny. It's a very thematic card, and if level 0 monsters existed in Yu-Gi-Oh!, this would be a prime candidate for an errata just on the basis of flavor alone. While a very funny card, it's useful in so few situations you really shouldn't be sleeving it up. And at number 7, we have Dystopia the Despondent. This is a level 12 Dark Fiend monster with 5,000 attack and defense. It cannot be normal summoned or set, and can be special summoned from your hand or graveyard by sending 4 level 1 monsters on your field to the grave, but it can't be special summoned in other ways. Other monsters you control cannot attack, and during either player's battle phase, when this battles, you can banish 1 level 1 monster from your grave to make it so that until the end of the damage step, this card is unaffected by other card effects and can't be destroyed by battle. Early boss monsters have a bad habit of either being way too good or basically entirely useless, and Dystopia falls into the latter category. Getting 4 level 1 monsters out on the field is much easier said than done. Even getting this many monsters on field at once can be a real challenge, but them all needing to be level 1 specifically makes it a real nightmare. Even the famous level 1 spam deck, Snake Eyes, doesn't often have 4 level 1 monsters in play at the same time. You're light on options for level 1 spam in general. They're too low level for almost any pendulum scale to work, so you're mostly relying on very generic ways of special summoning extra monsters, which are generally very resource intensive. Your best option may legitimately be gimmicks like 5-star Twilight, and that's not where you want your strategy to be. This card is old, so you did have extra turns to find the pieces of your combo, but there's no situation where you'd be able to normal summon 4 level 1 monsters in a row and then make Dystopia, especially since they tend to have pretty awful stat lines. Worst of all, once you do finally get Dystopia in play, it's kind of just a big monster. 5,000 attack is nothing to sneeze at, but if stats alone were enough to win you games of Yu-Gi-Oh!, King of Skull Servants would be the best card ever printed. It has no good protection, so you can get 5 for 1 or worse by a single removal trap. The battle protection sounds impressive, but it really only helps against a very specific set of cards because it only works for a very specific part of your turn. Dystopia is all style and no substance, and is generally just a dead draw anytime you find it. And at number 6, we have the Wicked Avatar. This is a level 10 Dark Fiend with a slew of effects. It can't be special summoned and must be normal summoned by tributing 3 monsters. When summoned, it stops your opponent from activating any spell or trap cards until the end of their second turn after the summon, and finally, it sets its attack and defense to the highest attack of any monster on the field, plus 100. This is meant to be a corrupted version of the Winged Dragon of Ra, and like most of the Egyptian god cards, the Wicked Gods are all pretty inconsistent. We should take a quick look at the other members of this little cycle while we're here, as they're also bad, but slightly better than Avatar is. The Wicked Dreadroot and the Wicked Eraser both have the same summoning restrictions as Avatar. However, Dreadroot has 4,000 attack and defense, and has the effect to have the attack and defense of all other monsters. Eraser has far more effects, gaining 1,000 attack and defense for each card your opponent controls, and blowing up the entire field when it's destroyed. It also lets you destroy it on your own to make it board wipe in a pinch. You could debate which of these cards is the worst, but Dreadroot is at least a consistent 4,000 attack monster, and Eraser is at least consistently a board wipe. The only thing Avatar gives you consistently is the lingering floodgate effect, which while strong, doesn't matter that much since it can never actually end the game. That's a good place to start with this card's problem. While the effect to always have the most attack of any monster on the field sounds cool, all it really does is make Wicked Avatar a slightly better version of something like Eater of Millions. Auto-winning battles is an alright effect, but it's not good enough to make a card broken. and certainly not enough to justify attributing 3 entire monsters. It's been talked to death, but the summoning condition of the god cards is bad enough to make almost any combination of effects and stats awful. Short of literally winning you the game on summon, this is such a clunky, slow, and resource-intensive way to summon a monster that it alone kills any potential the card had. A really big problem with Wicked Avatar is that after it gets done beating all of your opponent's monsters down, it can't end the game in a reasonable amount of time. You'll be stuck at a mere 100 attack unless you summon another monster, which, while not impossible, you did just tribute 3 monsters, so you're probably low on resources. This gives your opponent plenty of time to mount a comeback, even if they're hampered by their spell and trap cards being turned off. Maybe if the card had received a ton of support like the Egyptian gods, it would be strong enough to not make it onto this list. But Divine Evolution isn't enough to make this card seem worth playing to anyone but the most casual of players. And at number 5, we have Reaper of the Cards. This is a Dark Fiend flip monster with 1380 attack and 1930 defense. On flip, it lets you target and destroy a trap card on the field. If you try to target a face down card, it flips it up to check to see if it's a trap. And if it is, you destroy it. But if it's not, you set it back face down. At first, this seems like a pretty reasonable flip monster, especially for the very first set. But then you realize this isn't a level 4 monster, it's level 5. And the card instantly becomes worthless. For one, why would you ever play this as a flip effect for 1 tribute when you could play Man-Eater Bug or Hane from the same set as a flip monster form of removal? This gets even worse when you consider that the spell version of this card, Armored Ninja, is a level 1 monster, making it infinitely more useful. It is worth mentioning that this stat line isn't that bad for Legend of Blue Eyes White Dragon, as every monster has garbage stats in that set for some reason. But even back then, this was not worth tributing a monster for. A big issue with level 5 or higher flip monsters inherently is that your opponent knows what you're doing when you summon them. While players did normal summon and set monsters frequently back then, the only good tribute summons were monsters that you wanted in attack position. The design of most level 5 or higher monsters was for them to be powerful cards that ended the game quickly if you weren't dealt with. Flip monsters, on the other hand, were inherently more reactive, or at the very least, slower. Since most monsters were tribute summoned face up, this made all level 5 or higher flip monsters very telegraph, which is bad news for Reaper because it gets a lot worse when your opponent knows it's coming. If your opponent gets wind that Reaper of the Cards is coming, they can not only avoid setting traps, but set spell cards as bait to confuse you. All of this makes Reaper of the Cards do anything approaching effectiveness very difficult. And at number 4, we have Viser Des. This is a level 4 Dark Fiend with 500 attack and 1200 defense. It is the effect where, when it's normal summoned, you can target 1 monster your opponent controls. On your 3rd standby phase after this effect activates, destroy that monster. Also, this card can't be destroyed by battle while this card is on the field. Viser Des is one of the worst forms of removal the game has ever seen. There are so many things that make this card awful. For one, removing a card several turns from now does basically nothing. Your opponent can simply tribute the monster for a tribute summon, or in more recent years, link them off or use them as a synchro material. However, even if they don't find a way to get more value from the card, the monster can still attack and use all of its effects. Attacking is especially relevant here because in order to use Viser's effect, you have to normal summon it, which will put it in attack position. So your opponent can just attack the Viser and deal massive damage to you because it has a terrible attack stat of only 500. While it will survive battle, and you can switch it to defense afterwards, this does mean that Viser does a poor job protecting your life points, which is something that you want your monsters to do, especially in the earlier days of the game. If you were playing this back in the day and were at low life points, top decking a Viser wouldn't help you stay alive. Not stopping your opponent from attacking also means that if you're trying to remove a big monster on your opponent's field, it can still attack into your normal summons for the next 2 turns. So to play around that, you'd have to not normal summon for a couple of turns, but that would just let your opponent get even further ahead. This wouldn't be a huge issue in the modern day, of course, as your normal summons would be starting off some kind of combo. But let's be honest, if you're playing Viser Des, you're not a competent combo deck. Viser is a completely awful card that has no role in any strategy, which is probably why Konami waited 8 years to port it to the TCG. And at number 3, we have Tainted Wisdom. This is a level 3 Fiend with 1250 attack and 800 defense. It has the effect where, if it's changed from attack position to face-up defense position, you can shuffle your deck. But really, it may as well just not have an effect at all. Shuffling your deck should have no effect on the game at all, as your deck begins the game in a random order, so re-randomizing the order of your cards doesn't do much of anything. The only way for this effect to matter is for you or your opponent to have already played a card which stacks your deck in some other way, but those cards are few and far in between. Cards like Pot of Prosperity and Pot of Duality excavate cards from your deck and put all but one of them on the bottom of your deck. So any cards you saw there that you wanted, you won't be able to draw for the rest of the game. It can also interact pretty well with Convulsion of Nature, which makes both players flip their decks face up, letting you see what you'll draw next. If you don't like your next draw, you can shuffle it away for something better. And that's about the end of the scenarios where Tainted Wisdom is useful. And you may wonder if a card with a couple of use cases, however niche, can really be called this bad. Well, there's a couple more factors that make Tainted Wisdom especially bad. For one, any card that adds a card from your deck to your hand also makes you shuffle. So you could replace Tainted Wisdom in these scenarios with any of these cards. These cards are also very common in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! So especially these days, there's really no reason to rely on Wisdom. Worst of all though is that Wisdom is barely ever even active. It only works when you change it from specifically attack to specifically defense position. So the turn you summon Wisdom, you can't use it. The next turn, you can change its position and shuffle your deck once. However, after that, you'll have to wait a turn to change it from defense into attack, and then wait another turn to go back into defense, so you can only shuffle your deck every other turn. This is painfully slow even by old Yu-Gi-Oh standards, and you would really need to be able to shuffle every turn at the very least. Ultimately, the card does basically nothing, and is bad even in the few scenarios where the effect could conceivably come up. And at number 2, we have Dark Artist. This is a level 3 Dark Fiend with 600 attack and 1400 defense. It is the effect where, if it's attacked by a light monster, its defense is halved during the damage calculation. That's right, this level 3 poorly statted monster has a downside as its only effect. There's very little to say about this beyond acknowledging the sheer audacity that it must have taken to print a card this unfathomably bad. There was never a time in the TCG when Dark Artist was even the best monster if you needed specifically a level 3 Dark Fiend. If you were really desperate for a card with the exact level, type, and attribute, you could at least play something like the last spot on this list, Tainted Wisdom, which at least doesn't actively hurt you for playing it. The card does have a bit of a story behind it, as for some reason, despite coming out in 1999 in the OCG, the card didn't come out to the TCG until it was printed in Legacy of the Valiant, all the way in 2014, nearly a decade and a half after it was originally printed. You have to wonder why it took so long for it to get over here. There are a lot of cards that were printed early on in the OCG that have never come to the TCG, mostly awful normal monsters like Megurus Light. It feels like Konami just needed some extra pack filler for a random set, so they grabbed the first old OCG card they saw and put it into the set. It may have been included because it was put into a ton of random Yu-Gi-Oh games throughout the years, but the first theory seems more likely. And at number 1, we have Guardian Dreadscythe. This is a level 8 Dark Fiend with 2500 attack and 2000 defense. It can't be normal summoned or set, and must be special summoned by its own effect. If Guardian Iatos is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can special summon this card from your hand. When it's special summoned, you can equip a Reaper Scythe Dreadscythe from your deck to this card. While it's on the field, you cannot normal or special summon any monsters, but you can set them. If it's sent from the field to the graveyard, you can send one card from your hand to the grave and special summon it back. The Scythe is an equip spell that can only be equipped to Guardian Dreadscythe and gives 500 attack for each monster card in all graveyards. More important is Guardian Iatos. This is a level 8 Wind Fairy monster with the same stats as Dreadscythe. If you have no monsters in your grave, you can special summon it from your hand. It also allows you to send an equip spell attached to it to the grave to target and banish up to 3 monsters in your opponent's graveyard. Then it gains 500 attack for each monster banished until the end of the turn. There's a lot to go over here, mainly because there's a lot of moving parts. The main problem with Dreadscythe is that it's terribly bricky. The card literally does nothing while it's in your hand, and worse, it requires running 2 other cards that are either also completely useless in the case of Scythe, or mediocre in the case of Guardian to make proper use of it. You then have to either wait for your opponent to out your Iatos, or find a way to destroy it yourself to try to summon Dreadscythe. This is pretty awful, and will lead to a ton of games where either the Guardian or the Scythe are stuck in your hand, doing absolutely nothing. Once you do get Guardian Dreadscythe into play, it has two major flaws. For one, stopping you from summoning any other monsters is absolutely backbreaking. Sure, this is sort of your boss monster, but it also does nothing besides gain attack, so it's not like you can expect it to solo the entire game. If your opponent puts a spellbinding circle on it, you've now just floodgated yourself and have no way to win. The recursion effect may seem like a blessing, but it's actually more of a curse. If your opponent gets a monster that's larger than Dreadscythe and you still have cards in your hand, such as monsters you can't summon and are having a hard time setting, it will force you to lose cards and come back only to get destroyed by battle again. You may think that the scythe it equips itself with will prevent this from happening, but you'd be wrong. If you read Dreadscythe carefully, you'll notice it only equips the scythe to itself from deck. So if it gets destroyed and the scythe goes to the grave because it's not equipped anymore, and you summon the guardian back, you'll have to go get a new scythe from your deck to keep its attack up. If you run out of scythes, you're stuck being forced to resummon the guardian without being able to buff it up, only for it to keep getting destroyed over and over. This means that the card can effectively lock you out of the game in a bad scenario. It also has terrible synergy with the yugiohs, as one wants monsters in the grave while the other needs the grave to be empty, meaning you'll be pulled in a very different direction while deck building. However, the absolute worst thing about Guardian Dreadscythe is that Guardian yugioh is arguably just a way better card. It summons itself out early on in the game and can become a very powerful monster if you're running equip spells for it to munch on, while also disrupting your opponent's graveyard. You'd be better off just trying to protect it with spell cards than playing dead draws in your deck at minimum as insurance for if your opponent destroys it. Guardian yugioh is the worst fiend monster for a few reasons that all stack up on top of each other. It forces you to play a bunch of cards that are either dead draws or don't have synergy with each other in your deck. And once you do finally summon it, there are 1,000,001 ways you can go horribly wrong and actually help your opponent more than it helps you. This is one of the worst monsters not only to have the fiend typing, but across the entire game.